Welcome to the Contrarians and to another Wednesday live chat. Tonight we're going to talk Frank Zappa. In fact, the question we are putting out to the panel, what do you get out of Frank Zappa? So everyone in the chat room, please weigh in, get in the chat, get involved. But we've got a pretty big panel tonight. Martin's here. So without any further ado, let's get this one started. Welcome to the Contrarians, and it's Wednesday, and we are live. Tonight, we are going to talk Frank Zappa, of all things. Who would have thought? But what we want to know and what we want to hear from you is, what do you get out of Frank Zappa? What does Frank do for you? I don't have to do much of an intro. I'm going to throw it over to Martin, but we've got Jamie Laszlo here, bicyclelegs, and Martin Popoff. We may have more people join tonight. I don't know, but we do want to hear from you. And I want to say before we get started, if you like this type of content, if you want to be on these panels, if you're one of those people that like to talk music and you have no outlet, well, the Contrarians is for you. We do have a Patreon. You can join that. You can be on these panels. We also have a Ko-fi and also a TeePublic account if you want to buy a t-shirt or any kind of merch. But we do want to hear from you tonight. The chat room is open. Oh, we've got 16 people already. It's going to fill up because there's a lot of Zappa fans. So without any further ado, gentlemen, let's get started. I'm going to throw it right over to Martin Popoff, and he's going to get us started. But Martin, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Grant. I'm a little worse for wear. I was at a Max Webster book launch party for a buddy of mine, Bob Wagner. He's got a book out called Max Webster High Class. Big coffee table book. Check that out. I think you can go to just put in Max Webster High Class. And I met Guitar Hack. I'm wearing my Guitar Hack shirt. So we, Pete and I go on Guitar Hack all the time. But so this was Max Webster, right? And there were like literally at least 5 band members there. But it's kind of interesting we're doing this here because they're one of the only bands that ever gets compared to Frank Zappa. I call Max Webster, they're my favorite Canadian band of all time. I call them a cross between either Blue Oyster Cult and Frank Zappa, or Cheap Trick and Frank Zappa. And I know the guys from Cheap Trick are massive Max Webster fans. So yeah, it was cool seeing all the guys out there as well. A lot of buddies. But yeah, so I'm a little freaked out about this question because I came up with this question. What do you get out of Frank Zappa? And I wanted it to be a fairly deep question where, we're not ranking the albums. We're not going deep into the weeds and saying we like this album or that album and that sort of thing. Or at least this is the way I wanted to approach this. Because, I've got a good buddy of mine, Monty Connor, for example. He does not like Frank Zappa at all. He just thinks the whole idea of humor in music is just stupid. And it's, trust Frank Zappa to actually have an album called, what is it called? Does Humor Belong in Music? Right. I think it's a 1986 comp or something. Right. But yeah, so it's interesting. I started thinking about this is like, well, what do I really get out of Frank Zappa? And Grant and I decided, like, let's just leave the question at that and see how people treat it. And you can all treat it your own way, which is a great freedom way to do things. Frank Zappa was all about creativity in that. So I started thinking, okay, so what do I get out of Zappa and what do I not get out of Zappa? And I realized that there were certain things I don't go to Frank Zappa for, which I found a little bit interesting, surprising. I don't particularly go for marimbas or xylophone, and I don't even go for playing in general. When I think of the guitarists, I don't really think of the great guitarists that have gone through it and stuff. We got Steve Vai and Ike Willis on that one. I don't have Frank's autograph on anything. We've got Don Preston there. Yeah, there's another Don Preston, but all these different players that have gone through the band. I don't particularly even, like I say, go for the playing. As a drummer, I go a little bit for the drumming and certain things about the drumming, excite me, especially Chad Wackerman the most, because he's got this weird sort of, crazy, nerdy, hitting a lot of things, making a lot of noise. Drums don't sound particularly good style. It's kind of a neat style that he has, right? So I go a little bit for that. I thought my answer was going to be, then I thought about So yeah, just to finish up on guitar, I always call Frank Zappa's guitar playing, and I'd love to hear what other people think about this. And I've looked online and looked for answers to this, like what kind of style is he, right? And I've always considered him to be almost like the parody of a heavy metal guitar soloist when he solos, right? He reminds me a little bit of Jay Mascis from Dinosaur Jr. that way, right? It's just like over the top. It's like, look at me, I'm doing a guitar solo. Isn't this dumb, right? So there's something about him there, and I've never seen anybody or himself kind of articulate that being there. But again, other guitarists don't really get a lot out of the whole thing. So I thought, okay, my answer was going to be vocals. I get a lot out of the vocals. It's either vocals or lyrics, right? Kind of thing. I love the vocals. I love Frank's vocals, all the variety of things he does. I think he's just one of the most, I'd say underrated, because people don't talk about him as a vocalist that much. But I just love listening to that voice, whether it's low or in the middle or acerbic or trying to be funny or whatever, or goofy, or the Barry White that he does. So there's that, and there's definitely Ike Willis on the vocals as well. And then I thought lyrics. Am I really coming for the lyrics, right? And I think overall, very, very entertaining lyrics. They remind you of a time when you could say those things. Most of those things cannot be said anymore. But I think in the long run, what I decided that I get out of Zappa the most is the inspiration of just the most unique, creative artist that you could possibly imagine. The band is almost like an unband. You can't even put him in a category. There's literally him in a category, and that's it. There are other bands out there in the world, like say even in a loose way, a Pantera. But as soon as a bunch of bands start copying Pantera, there's now a little bunch of bands that are in that group, right? There's really nobody that belongs and doesn't fall flat on their face trying to be in the category that Frank Zappa is all alone. So that's really cool. I once did a podcast episode of my History in 5 Songs called Snow Globe Bands. And the whole idea there was that bands that create, a hermetically sealed environment that you could shake up and it's only them in there, right? And I know I included things like Stranglers and Type O Negative, and I'm not even sure I included Zappa in that, but I think that's the main thing I want to say that I come to Frank Zappa for then, is the fact that literally he is a snow globe band. You can attach yourself to his life philosophy if you want. You can take bits of it, not all of it if you want. There's all the misogyny, there's the women stuff, the sex stuff, the politics, the band stuff, the being ripped off stuff, the anti-drug stuff, the anti just people being stupid stuff. I guess that's the overlying theme of all of it. So I mean, you could come for it, but that's all part of it too. There's a philosophy in this snow globe. There's the fact that he's a genre unto himself. So I'm going to go with that. I just and also within that snow globe as well. I don't throw this word around too loosely when it comes to artists, because art is so subjective. But this guy is as close to a genius that we have. Black Page and all that, writing out parts, right? All that arranging he does, the classical stuff, the guitar instrumental albums. This guy's as close to as a genius as I think we can get across all this stuff. You can't be out there calling Bob Dylan a genius and things like that. People who are just good poets, right? This guy, this is a whole different level of getting stuff done. And yeah, sadly we lost him all too young. He would have been kept going. He was the Energizer Bunny, right? So there you go. I'm going to go with what do I get out of Frank Zappa? He's a snow globe band.
Whoa, there you go. I love that. But yeah, there's all different eras of Frank too that you can dive into, and they all offer something great. Let's take a look and see what people are talking about in the chat. Right when we started, we already had 28 comments. Right when we started.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, there's William Walker. He says, "Is there so much social? If there is so much social commentary from Zappa, does that make him dated? Did you have to be there?" Absolutely, William. I mean, Broadway the Hard Way. The whole thing is about 1988 politics. It's got Jesse Jackson on there, Michael Jackson, Pat Robertson, Ronald Reagan's in his stuff, George Bush. A lot of it is very, very dated. Absolutely. That's for sure. Let's see, being bold. Frank felt people in general were stupid, and he would point out their stupidity. He would make fun of women, men, Jews, Catholics, hippies,
He made fun of
politicians.
everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, a lot of what he says, man, I walk down the street listening to stuff, say he definitely would not have got away with that back then. Let's see. I saw Frank Zappa live in the late 70s at the Celebrity Theater in Phoenix 2 times. Medium-sized theater, and the stage rotated. Wow. He stood on the milk crate during his guitar solos. Incredible. That's interesting, eh? Williams says, not to mention Zappa was a genius on like 100 albums. Absolutely. So that's super important as well. Zappa did very good interviews too. Nice one, Chris Flood. Absolutely. You could just be entertained listening to the guy's interviews. Dead Kennedys is dated punk rock politics. Yeah, that's kind of cool too. So yeah. I don't know. Let's Grant, turn it over to one of our otherwise music swamis.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's throw it over to Jamie Laszlo. Jamie, what is your thoughts? What do you get out of Frank Zappa?
You know what? I think, as Martin was talking, I think there's 2 people that a lot of people think, what would this guy have to say about today's world and today's politics? And I think those 2 people are Frank Zappa and George Carlin. Everyone wants to know, man, what would those 2 guys be thinking with the shitstorm we've been in for a while? But yeah, his interviews on YouTube still get a lot of views. I think people watch them and try to put today's world into what he's saying, to get an idea of what he would think today. But when I saw the question, what do you get out of Frank Zappa? There's a lot of ways to interpret that. The first thing I thought of is he does a lot of weird ass music. Why the F do you like that weird ass music? What are you getting out of that? I know Martin likes a lot of the song-based songs that he does, like Cosmic Debris, which he does a great job of writing songs like that. He plays guitar well. A lot of people probably like his humor. I never found him very funny, though, in the songs. I do like his singing when he goes way down low. I'm not a big fan of when he starts talking like this. It's like goofy. It's like what you're saying is not funny, but you're saying it in a funny manner, which you're trying to make it fun. I don't know. His humor has a charm to it, though. It doesn't bother me. I was introduced to him in 1988. I knew of him, but a buddy of mine in college introduced me to him. But over the last 10 years, I've been buying his stuff. So I know there's a lot of people watching me going, dude, I saw him in 74. Why are you on the screen and I'm in the chat? I don't know. It just worked out that way. But I do have, I think I like his weird shit the best. The really avant-garde stuff. The jazz fusion stuff. And I'll tell you why. This is the thought I had today, because I wasn't going to join the chat until I had this thought. And I'm like, I got to get this out there. And I got some talking points written down because I don't want to lose my train of thought, especially on a live show with X amount of people watching. So this is the thought I have. When we listen to pop music, all right, most of us get the same thing out of pop music. If we all sat here and listened to Madonna's Like a Virgin, we'd all walk away with similar interpretations. Okay, like a virgin. Oh, we get it. Even with bands like Iron Maiden, if you go see Maiden live, all right, and look around the crowd, everybody's kind of doing the same thing, same motions. Fear of the Dark starts. What does the crowd start doing? All start doing the same thing. So we're all on the same page, even with bands like Maiden. But when you have artists like Frank Zappa, and they're doing this avant-garde, crazy shit, we all start getting different interpretations of that music. All right. And within the creation of the art of this music, within the actual creation, of the band and the artist, you have many, let's call them paintbrushes and brush strokes to create the art. You have the band leader, you have the basic idea for the song, you have all the different instruments, you have all the band members and they're improvising. So there's a lot of things going on to create this art. And when the music's finished and recorded, it comes to us. But unlike songs with tight structures like pop songs, the art is not done when it reaches us, because our interpretation becomes the last brushstroke in that art. So we kind of make the art our own art by contributing to the art. So it's like this. If you have 0.5% share in a company, all right, yeah, it's their company, but you do own a little part of that. So what I'm saying is we have like a 0.5% share in the art of this music, that 0.5% being our last interpretation of the music when it reaches us. And that aspect is what I get out of the music. Partial ownership of the music. It's like interactive art, kind of in a way. So, and not only do we add the last brushstroke by our interpretation, but based on our mood on the day we listen to it, we could be adding a different brushstroke to the art. This one goes up, that one goes down. So the music becomes an always changing thing, like a living organism in that manner. So, and you could say the same thing about bands like the Grateful Dead and Fish. When they start jamming for about 20 minutes, everybody's in a different spot. And if you happen to be on LSD,
I was just going to think that too.
Now you're adding another personal aspect to it. You're adding visuals to the art, your own visuals to it. So now it becomes even more personal. So you could take a guy like Jackson Pollock. We all look at the painting. What I see in it, you don't see in it. So it becomes personal to us. And you kind of feel like you own it. I see the bicycle wreck and the this and the that, and you see a dog running up a hill. Okay, so we own that image. We own the thoughts we have when we listen to the music, and the music becomes a part of us. That's what I'm getting.
Nice.
Wow.
Wicked. I want to add something not nearly as profound as that, but just
That's pretty
something
profound.
I forgot. Yeah, that was really cool, Jamie.
I
But,
get my best ideas either when I'm drinking or when
Yeah.
I'm in the shower.
yeah.
That one I got when I
Excellent.
was drinking in the shower.
See?
Nice. No, I just wanted to mention I definitely come to Frank Zappa and get a lot out of the production as well. I had to just do a top 20 for Goldmine that's going up next week. Top 20 most amusing Frank Zappa songs. So, well, okay, so I'll go there first. So the other thing I get out of Frank Zappa, strictly commercial. I mentioned that album. I mentioned it in the thing. Jamie's right. I love the short commercial songs, the songs that are put together like songs that are usually amusing, but I also love the production. I listened to Disco Boy, and that thing is just an absolute production tour de force. There's so many interesting, cool sounds going on in there, from the Tom Scholz, almost like rock boxy sort of guitar, to the weird drum sounds. There's a little acoustic in there. The vocals are up and down all over the place. Really neat stuff, right? Really close mic'd or far mic'd. So there's a lot of cool stuff that way as well. But yeah, let's just jump into here. So we got, oh yeah, so William Walker's complimenting you as well here. I think this is very profound of Jamie. I never thought of this before. Let's see. DJ D says, think about a young Steve Vai transcribing Zappa's music, putting on paper the notes to Zappa's music. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah,
Zappa actually liked Black Sabbath a lot. Yeah, I know that whole story. I've heard that story about Tony being in a bad mood, and Frank was, yeah, they got their wires crossed a little bit here and there, but they loved Zappa too, right? They got a lot out of it. You know, it's that humor helped them get through their trials and tribulations, right? Percussion instruments were always the magnets, says Brian McFadden. Listening to this band, William also says that it makes sense. Vai went on to do basically the same thing. You're right. Flexible was very much like a Frank Zappa blueprint. It's one of the first things. He's one of the only guys that you'll put in a stature good enough to say, all right, you can join the club, right?
Yeah.
You can be like Zappa, because we don't allow a lot of people into that club, right? We just think, especially if they're trying to be funny, right? It generally doesn't work. He was, another guy, I'll put Devin Townsend up against Frank Zappa as a genius as well. And another guy who fits in that, just to give you a little Vai, sex and religion crossover there, right? with our good old Canadian genius Devin. Frank started as a drummer, so he's all about percussion. Pretty cool. Love the vibes and rhythms. So do I. It's just that I'm not really coming to it for that. So yeah, Zappa is also good friends with Mike Nesmith from the Monkees, says Pete Brown. Yeah, Devin Townsend Williams saying very incredible as well. Absolutely. And his catalog's probably going to surpass Frank's one day. So anyways, let's hear from Bicyclelegs from Australia. What's going on?
Hey. Well, thanks for having me. You know, this was an interesting topic to come at, you know, just what do you get out of a particular artist? And, you know, with Zappa, there's so much you can go with because he had so many different periods. I love the comments that we've had in the chat about percussion because that's where I'm kind of going with what I get out of Frank Zappa. Not the percussion in and of itself, but percussion, use of percussion, the way that he uses it is very typical of somebody who's not just a songwriter, but is a composer. And that's what I get out of Frank Zappa. You know, Frank Zappa is a composer. And it comes out right from his earliest work. You know, you have that first 3 great albums from the Mothers. And just starting on Freak Out, you have The Return of the Son of Monster Magnet, which he didn't even actually get to finish that piece in the studio. He'd done all the percussion work on it, and he wanted to overdub a whole lot more on it. And then he was like, the record company were like, no, sorry, you're done. But yeah, that's that one there. That's my favorite Frank Zappa.
Yeah, mine too. There you go.
All time.
Brilliant.
We're only in it for the money. The composition on this album is incredible. You know, this is one of the very first albums also of an artist using the studio as an instrument, as opposed to just regular production. This album, We're Only in It for the Money, he's using the studio as an instrument. He's playing the studio. You know, the thing, you know, Frank Zappa does so many different things. He does straight out rock and roll. The early stuff was psychedelic. He would go into jazz fusion stuff. He would do the comedy songs sort of later on, the late 70s, early 80s. He would do orchestral pieces. You know, I mean, you talk about the, you know, Hot Rats. You know, I've got the Jamie shirt there. But, you know, the wonderful jazz fusion stuff, but all really precisely composed. You know, it's not just a, you take a song like Peaches and Regalia. That piece, it's not, you know, a typical jazz piece was often, they would write a 16-bar melody and then just improvise. Peaches and Regalia, that whole thing is written out beginning to end. You know, it's every note is planned and precisely placed in that piece. You know, and then he would do, you know, One Size Fits All, probably my second favorite Frank Zappa album. You know, and he's getting into sort of, you know, some really sort of progressive rock and that sort of thing with that one. And then he would do the orchestral pieces. You know, there's orchestral favorites just as one of them. And the thing that amazes me about Frank Zappa is, you know, a lot of rock musicians would dabble in orchestral pieces. But what they would tend to do is they would write the themes for the piece, and then they would farm out the actual orchestration to a professional orchestrator. Frank Zappa wrote his own orchestrations. The only other rock musician I know of that wrote his own orchestrations was Joe Jackson. And now the difference there is that Joe Jackson was a classically trained musician. He went to the Royal Academy of Music. Frank Zappa was completely self-taught. He taught himself to write full orchestral scores by reading books in a library. If that's not genius, I don't know what is. will never cease to amaze me, the fact that he was a completely self-taught musician, and yet he was able to do so many different styles of music. You know, I don't tend to go for the later sort of more humorous works, not because I'm, you know, not into the humor or whatever. I just find that compositionally they're not as interesting as, you know, a Hot Rats or a One Size Fits All. Because that's what I really get out of Frank Zappa, is the actual compositions. You know, his sort of catchphrase or his motto is better word, was a quote from one of his favorite composers, Vear's, and it was, "The modern day composer refuses to die." Frank Zappa lived that motto throughout his whole career. And even though he, you know, obviously did sadly leave us way too soon, his music lives on and his catalog lives on, because, you know, he released something like 62 albums while he was alive, but there's been another 50 or 60 released since he passed away, because the man was just so incredibly creative. That's what I get out of Frank Zappa, is the composition and the creativity. It's unparalleled in rock music as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Nice. Well put.
Wow.
Love that. Love that. Let's just see
Excellent.
what else get. Yeah, here we got here. I think it was Pete. He says, I agree with Bicycle Legs point. Frank is a solid musician, writer, composer, arranger, and producer. Dude really was way ahead of his time. You know, oddly enough, he's almost like way you know, he's almost from an earlier time. He's almost like that classical composer from Austria in the 18th century or whatever, in a way as well too. So it's kind of funny. Tinseltown Rebellion is my favorite Zappa album. Bamboozled by Love is a classic. Yeah, I prefer latter 80s. You know, yeah, some of my favorites are these ones. Chic Your Booty and You Are What You Is probably my favorite. I think, Grant, don't we have a Contrarians episode where I call this my favorite Zappa
I do
album?
believe so.
I think we do, yeah. I just wanted to mention this as well, just for kicks. I always love this stuff. I've got you know, when I did a big memorabilia exchange with a buddy of mine, so Stephen Rosen, who's a famous rock journalist in California, but you know, you got the old Foxing phonogram letterhead, and it's Dear Radio or Press Person, Phonogram Mercury and Zappa Records would frankly love you to come and meet Chic Your Booty. Would you walk a mile for a camel? You won't have to if you camel along to El Privado on February 13th at 6 p.m. We guarantee you thrills, excitement, fun, drama, surprises, food, and drinks. All this for the price of a phone call. Just RSVP to Ellen by February 9th. Place El Privado at Carlos and Charlie's, 8240 Sunset Boulevard, February 13th, 1979. Very cool, eh?
Well, that's wonderful.
And we got a press photo of good old Frank there. Cool shot of him. That's my favorite looking Frank era, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, what else we got here? Brian McFadden, all the live albums always contain the better production and live tracks, deeper tracks. Yeah, the live albums were crazy, right? The live albums, you couldn't tell, were you getting half new music, all new music, no new music, you know, just new lyrics on top of old music. It was so crazy what they did live, right? And that stuff, again, was so planned and put together and you know, so hard on the musicians as well. But yeah, Chris Flood solos on Willie the Pimp was amazing. I gotta agree with on Peaches on in Regalia too. So musical. That thing just goes through your head, even though it's instrumental and jazz fusion or whatever you want to call it. It's so memorable what he comes up with melodically on that. Although you know, melody. The melodies are often very, very, very sophisticated too. There's a whole Frank Zappa school of that atonal dissonant melody thing that when we hear it in other bands, we go, that's Zappa-esque kind of thing, right? So anyways, Grant, back to you.
Go. All right, excellent. I was going to say, it's hard for me to even make a comment on this because you guys are so well thought out and well spoken, but I am kind of going to piggyback with what Bicycle Leg said. I love that early period, the Mother's period, the best, because think about it. The 60s, which was like a wide open frontier. Frank Zappa, you know, everyone talks about the Monterey Pop Festival with Jimi Hendrix with his debut, and everybody sat on the audience just totally shocked their mouths hanging open. Because when Hendrix came to the US and played at Monterey, it was like the aliens landed on the planet. Think about this too. Think about this in 66 when Freak Out came. I've been like on other shows on Rachel's Ghosts and stuff. People have talked about seeing that album when they were kids, when, back in 66, and there was nothing like it. It was the first double record set with a, cover that folded out. It was, and you think about this too, trailblazing. Who would have thought that was the Mothers of Invention's debut album, and it's a 2-record set? Frank, no one was doing quite what he was doing in the 60s. Think about that. No one was making fun of the Beatles. He made a parody, "We're Only in It for the Money," of Sgt. Pepper cover. He was just so inspirational. And the thing about that 60s period that I like too is the instrumentation, and I think the melodies. Back then in that early stuff, the melodies were very good. Yes, it was experimental, but there's catchy songs in there that stick in your brain. And those Mothers albums are just absolute treasures in my book. You get to shake your booty, and you're starting to get to that point. Yeah, the playing's great and all that, but it gets to that kind of shticky thing where it's kind of like childlike humor. You didn't have any of that stuff in the 60s stuff. Yeah, he was making fun of the freaks and he didn't like the hippies, but it wasn't childlike. It was very intelligent. And I don't know. I just think that those Mothers records, and you even mentioned Hot Rats, beautiful record. The guitar playing on that, he was on fire then. But everybody, like we've had a lot of people in the chat say, well, I like the 80s or I like this. That's the great thing about Zappa. He can touch so many people on so many levels. I mean, everybody's got their own favorite period,
You don't have to like it all to be.
You don't have to like it all. There's probably something there for you,
Holding stuff up. Camarillo Brillo from this, man, amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure what my point was, but I just wanted to mention that. I love Frank, but that early period.
I think there was a point in there somewhere.
Yeah,
there's a point in there somewhere.
I would even go so far as to say you were saying, Jamie, that you don't have to like everything in the Zappa catalog. I would say that unless you are like an absolute sort of Zappa devotee, it's almost impossible to like all of it because there's just so very different kinds of music.
Have you just held up? I don't like Man from Utopia at all.
Well, I'm not a big fan of, say, the Flo and Eddie period of the Mothers.
Yeah, I've heard other people say that too, because it's real shticky and the joke. It's all jokes and
it's just a little bit too vaudeville, But everybody gets, but even on those Flo and Eddie albums, there'll be the odd piece where there's one of these brilliant Frank Zappa compositions. I go more for the music than the lyrics with Frank Zappa, except for, say, an album like We're Only in It for the Money, which is some of the best satire that you'll ever hear.
It's a perfect record. Yeah.
But on the whole, I tend to go more for the music with Zappa than the lyrics. And, that's kind of how Zappa felt about it too. He felt like he just liked to write music, but he knew that people needed to hear somebody singing on these records. And so he wrote lyrics that he liked rather than, he didn't want to write dumb lyrics. He didn't want to write stupid love songs or whatever. So he wrote satirical things and humorous things. And, sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. But, to him, the lyrics were there because the singer needed something to sing, whether it was himself or one of the other brilliant singers that he used to employ over the years. But, first and foremost in Frank's mind, it was the music and the composition that was, foremost in his mind.
It's funny, Bicycle Legs. I made that comment earlier about when he plays one of those, brutal late 70s, early 80s guitar solos, that it sounds like he's saying, "Oh, I'm going to be Punky Meadows here, right?" Or whatever, right? I'm going to be the the parody of the stadium rock guitar player. I wonder if there's a parallel there with the lyrics where he's kind of soiling the idea of the real estate of where lyrics are supposed to go by saying, look, I'm just gonna crack jokes. I'm gonna treat the lyrical space as sacrilege. And I'm just going to say a bunch of stuff I'm on my mind that I would rant about with my buddies rather than make a sacred, love song with not a lot of large words in it. And a lot of the words will repeat. I'm just going to, use this space in almost like a transgressive or sacrilegious way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I think musically with those songs in the sort of, early 80s and that sort of thing, he was definitely doing that as well, using the music to send things up as much as the lyrics. But don't forget that when he was doing those sort of 80s albums with the humor and the shtick, and as Grant puts it, and all that sort of thing, he was also, writing compositions and recording them with the London Symphony Orchestra. Right. So he was never just doing the one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I do love the lyrics to Pajama People. And I love the melody. Probably my favorite lyrics that I've heard from.
Oh, yeah. William Walker. Smash the like button. While we're mentioning this, please like this because it helps with the algorithm. Please give a like if you like what you're seing here today. Please
press it lightly. Don't break
don't break anything, for crying out loud. But just give us a nice like. That would be great.
We can't be remiss in not mentioning Valley Girl, right? With Zappa, the heavy metal song, the most heavy metal song he ever did, and he's got his daughter singing on it. And I love, of course, that this album is called "Ship Arriving Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch." With that graphic there, right? That's what that means, of course, right? And yeah, this has a lot of long instrumental stuff on it, but I completely love No Not Now on this. So melodic and so cool, and the playing is so interesting. So again, we could almost do an entire show just going through his productions and how they go up and down, and he changes this and he does that, and how beautiful Zoot Allure sounds, in the mid 70s, stuff like that, right? Because they don't all, he even didn't always go for one production thing, and he didn't always go for, the platonic ideal of perfect either. Some of those 80s albums have kind of he's going for a sort of tense, taut, mid-rangey thing on them, right? So yeah, it's pretty interesting. Even like I say, just the productions. It's kind of like Metallica. Metallica, spends a lot of time trying to be different album to album and coming up with something, that hasn't been done before, sort of thing. And Zappa's definitely like that.
You know what else we could do a whole show on? I reckon
What's that?
Just Frank Zappa album and song titles. The man was so incredible. I mean, think about that. Ship Arriving Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch.
Yeah.
Another album title that comes to mind immediately is Weasels Ripped My Flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then on that album there is a track called Prelude to the Afternoon of a Sexually Aroused Gas Mask.
Right. Yeah.
You
got Shake Your Booty, the classic Shake Your Booty, right?
Yeah.
There it is on the back. Yeah, and remember the one, it's one of those guitar albums. What do they called? Shut Up and Play Your Guitar. That cool shot where he's holding the cigarette and it looks like he's holding a gun to his head, right? And yet he's smoking. Take a look at that picture. It's really cool what he did in that picture. I think it's a black and white picture, and he's holding, and there's something in the background, and he's like smoking, and it looks like he's got a gun to his head. So there's almost a foreshadowing or something going on there. But I must say, I do recall having the impression, reading his autobiography years and years and years ago, reading about his childhood. It seems like he probably got cancer from living to so many polluted industrial sites as a kid. He really talked about that all through the early part of that book. Really, really good book that he did.
Was there a lot of humor in that book? Did he write funny at times? I
can't remember. No, I don't believe so. I think it was pretty straight and really informative. But yeah, when he died, I couldn't shake that impression about everything he was saying about living near industrial waste as a kid.
Yeah. It's a great book, but I'm the industrial waste probably didn't help, but I think tobacco being his quote unquote favorite vegetable didn't help either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
don't know. Well, he died what, pancreatic cancer?
Prostate cancer.
Oh, prostate cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Was
know.
he mid-50s?
Yeah,
was-
I think he was.
I think he was 50. Wasn't he?
Yeah,
Or was he
49,
40?
50. Wasn't it was it same year as
It was
or
he died in 92, so
very close to Freddie Mercury, right? I believe it was
Close.
very close
Yeah.
to when Freddie Mercury died. Yeah. Oh, there's Rand. I got into Frank Zappa in 71. When I was in the Air Force, I bought Chunga's Revenge, and I really liked it. And then he says, I bought Live at the Fillmore East. I really like that. And today, my favorite music by him is Inca Roads, the
keep it
Helsinki
on the
tape.
wrong thing.
Voice typing, so there's going to be okay. Ike Turner was mad at him for paying Tina, and the Ike gets too much, says Chris Flood. Here we go. I think Zappa died in 93, says William
Okay.
Walker. One size fits all. There's Rand. He's just Fusion 73 through 77. I saw him live in 81 in Santa Cruz, California. Amazing show. Yeah, good stuff. Gregory Pegg, burnt weenie sandwich. Boy, man, you know who? I can't say I like him more than Frank Zappa, but also fits in this camp. Who I love to death dearly is Captain Beefheart. And there's obviously that carryover, and those two were, peas in a pod in some sense, and really only in one or two senses. I mean, other than that, Captain Beefheart was not putting in the kind of work Frank Zappa was putting in. Put it that way.
We could have done a show on Trout Mask Replica.
Well, yeah. Well, we could do a Captain
That's all
Beefheart
you
show at
guys.
some point. I'd like to do a Captain show. I love that
Yeah,
guy.
we could do
I
that.
love his catalog. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, Trout Mask is an acquired taste.
yeah.
But the people that, when you listen to that record initially, it doesn't take hold of you at all. I mean, you have to really spend time with it.
Yeah.
After repeated listens, but then it starts opening up, and you finally start to get it. It's
Yeah.
brilliant. It's brilliant.
We're talking about musical geniuses. There is one guy today I kind of put in that category. It reminds me a little bit of Zappa with the sense of humor and the orchestration and the pop songs. Danny Elfman.
Yes.
Put him in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, all right, kids. Well, anybody else have anything to add on this discussion?
I don't think so. I don't think
we.
No, I was just going to say I'm not surprised Rand's favorite Zappa song is Inca Roads, because that's got to be one of the proggiest ones he ever did.
Yeah. Well, there's a big debate there too, right? Is Zappa a prog artist? I mean, like I say, he's so singular, you don't know what camp to put him in. But that's a hot debate among prog people. Does he belong is he a progressive rock act, right?
I think, like most things, he dabbled, but I don't think you could call him a progressive rock act per se. No.
Yeah.
But he had
definitely
progressive
dabbled in it,
elements.
though.
You could call him a jazz musician if you wanted. There's just too many categories or genres in Zappa. You can't put him in a category. I don't think.
No.
But
All right, gentlemen. I'd say we wrap it up. I think we covered it.
Thank
You
you. That
guys
was
are
great.
you guys are so good that we can get through these things quickly.
Yeah, wicked.
Well, kids, I want to thank everybody for joining in the chat. It was a lot of fun. If we didn't get to your comment, we're just kind of winging it. But we do appreciate you showing up, and we love the interaction with everybody. I want to thank Jamie, bicyclelegs, and Martin, and myself. What the hell? I'll give myself a thanks. Like I said, if you like this, you can be a part of these channels. Check out the Patreon link below. So before I just wrap this up, anybody else have anything to say real quick? We're only 44 minutes into it.
I don't think so. We can thank William Walker for the nice donation there. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, thanks for the dono. We love donos on this channel. We love them. Yeah, thanks, William Walker. We appreciate it. All right, gentlemen. Well, let's wrap it up. Thanks for coming on. We'll see you on the next one.
All right.